guys, and hi everyone. First of all, thanks a lot for joining, and hopefully you will learn something out of this session. I am Prakhar Agrawal, and currently I'm working as a software engineer at Google. And the session is organized and sponsored by Hackstack. Hackstack is a platform where you can find a lot of videos, lectures, and a lot of events which are happening on a currently on a weekends, and then we are planning to launch a bunch of other things on the platform. So please stay tuned and stay connected with us. And to start with, today what we'll do is we'll try to understand uh, the system design as a whole, and then we'll try to design a messenger or a WhatsApp chat. Okay, so let's start. Let's let's try to make this session as interactive as possible. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or drop me a message on the chat. I'll try to answer those questions going forward. So let's start with basics of system design. So generally a design, whenever you talk about system design is actually distributed into multiple parts, right? Let me actually share my screen with all of you. Let's try to write few things there so that it will be easier. Just give me a second. Yep. Okay, so I hope you people can see my screen, and also let me know in case if there is any disturbance, or if if my voice is not clear, or if it starts cracking in between. So just message me or just unmute yourself and speak up in case if you can't hear me clearly. So yeah, generally system design is distributed into four main parts, four or you can say five main parts. Let's try to see each of those. So the first part is the requirements. Okay. Sometimes we call it as the features as well. Okay. So whenever you need to design a system, you come up with the requirements, you come up with the features for the same. Once you have decided, once you came up with all the features and requirements, then you talk about the estimations. Okay. So there are various things which are discussed as a part of estimations. We'll try to see what all things are covered as a part of the estimations. Then the third part is your high level detailed design. High level detailed design. Okay. So once you come up with all the requirements, you come up with all the features which you need in your design or a system. Uh, After that, you come up with the estimations about the traffic, about the bandwidth, about the QPS your system should be able to support for the next X years. And once you do all those, once you come up with all the requirements and estimations, you go on to the high level detailed design. You try to see how can you keep your, I mean, how to design your system, what all layers you want, what kind of scaling. There are a bunch of things, caching, then load balancing. All those factors are discussed as a part of detailed design. And once you come up with that design, the fourth part is your monitoring and alerting. Okay, so after the detailed design, you generally talk about monitoring and alerting. What kind of what things do you need to monitor on your system? What kind of alerts do you want on your system in case if everything starts failing, right? Your bot, there should be a bot which should be able to inform you that something is failing or something is wrong, and so that your team or someone from your team can actually take a action on it ASAP, so that it doesn't hamper the it doesn't hamper the uh, experience of the end user, and you are able to resolve the problem as soon as possible. So monitoring and alerting is again a very important part of it. And the fifth and the final part is maintenance. Correct. So you should be able to maintain your design, you should be able to maintain your system. Now you can actually, to maintain your system, what can possibly happen is you actually go through multiple iterations. You make some changes in this design, so you do the iterations and you make changes in the design. So it's a software development cycle, it's a complete cycle. the software development lifecycle, where you do multiple iterations and make sure that your system is sustainable for a longer time. Sure that your system is sustainable for a longer time. Okay, and once you actually once you do the iterations, again you come up with the requirements, like what all new features you want in your system. Correct. You again do the estimations whether the new changes in my system will affect any of the current changes, or do I need to change my estimations? Do I need to change the number of servers? Do I need to see that how much extra memory I'll need if I'll add these features? So all those things again comes as a part of the estimations. Now the features which are again adding, you talk about those detailed design, you try to come up with a design, then you come up with the monitoring and alerting part of it, and then how to maintain those systems in a longer. And this keeps on going, and then this is known as software development life cycle. Okay. So I'll try to distribute it into two parts. So generally, most of the people might have faced a question on a system design or a high level design in their interviews, right? So whenever you are in the interview, you don't need to talk about the complete software development life cycle. You can mention that you need to divide your current current problem into these five parts, and try to focus on each of these questions going forward when you're actually designing your system, and whenever you're discussing with your interviewer. Okay. Now, what we'll try to do is, as a part, we'll try to take up one of the design, which is Messenger or a WhatsApp design, or take any chat app, right? Or Hangouts, WhatsApp design as a part of this to understand all these requirements, estimation, high level design, monitoring, alerting, and how to maintain your code. So before I actually move on to the next part, do you have any questions, or do you have any questions, or do you need any clarifications? Okay, if there are any questions, then please ask. Otherwise, we can move on to the next part. So here, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So is LLD part of this design, or it will be like separate one?
It's a high level design. We are not talking about the low level design. We'll take some consideration. So again, a design question can be divided into two parts: a high level design and a low level design, right? Whenever you talk about designing a complete system, you generally talk about a high level design, correct? And if you want to you can do a low level design as well, but if you talk about a particular piece or a particular API, how to design the classes, how to design your interfaces, what things you should keep in your classes, how should you distribute your what should be your member functions, what should be your data members, how can you have encapsulation, inheritance. So whenever you talk about those things, right, that is generally comes as a part of the low level design. When you are actually going into the details of the design itself, then when you're going into the details of writing the class itself. But if you want to design a system as a whole, you generally talk about the servers, the capacity, what are the features you want as a part of your system. Then you talk about what all APIs you need, how many database instances do you need, do you need any caching, do you need to do a load balancing between your different layers. So all these factors, or all these points comes under the high level design. Okay, so today what we are trying to do is we are trying to target the high level design for a Messenger or a WhatsApp a chat, WhatsApp chat or a Messenger. So that is the problem for today, and we'll try to see the high level design for the same. Okay, so hopefully you got you people understood the difference between high level design and a low level design. Okay, so let's move on to any other questions, any other thing which you want to ask before I move on to the next part. Okay, I mean, if you feel hesitant to ask questions by unmuting yourself, feel free to add your question on the chat. I will definitely try to take it at some point of time. Cool. Let's move on to the next part. So, and one more thing, guys. I want to make this session as interactive as possible because this session is arranged for you people. So, try to be as interactive as possible. I mean, if you need any clarifications, then let me know. I'll try to clarify those things. Okay. So let's try to start with the requirement part. Okay. So, okay. So I hope everyone can see my screen. So we'll start with the requirements. Okay. So requirements are again generally distributed into two parts. The first part is the functional requirements, and the second part is non-functional requirements. The first part is functional requirements, and the second part is non-functional requirements. So can anyone tell me what is the difference between functional requirement and what is the difference between functional and non-functional requirement?
The functional requirements are what our app or website expected to do. Non-functions are to maintain it, to make it available, what we need to do as a system.
Exactly. That's a good answer. Thanks for answering that. I'll try to add some more details into your answer. Your answer is exact. It's correct. But let me put in some more details. So generally, whenever you talk about the functional requirements, right, you actually try to gather those information from the end user. So let's say if you want to create a chat app, right? So what are the functional requirements? What should user be able to do? So they should be able to see the previous chat. They should be able to see the history of your chat. They should be able to see all the previous all the people with whom they have actually had a conversation in past. They should be able to see the date and time on which they have sent the message. They should be able to see whether the message was seen by the person or not. So these are all functional requirements, right? So these are generally collected by the end users. So what happens is whenever any industry or any company try to work on a particular projects, they actually hire a UX people where UX research people where these people try to gather the information, talk to people from different diversity and try to gather this information and try to see how can they design their app, uh, try to see what all can be the functional requirement of the problem which they are trying to solve with the help of their application. But in case of interviews, because and these people like spend like 6 months or a year to come up with all the functional requirements. But whenever you are in an interview, you don't need to go into that much detail. What you can do is you can try to collect these information from your interviewer. You should ask them that what all things you want as a feature in my current system. So let's say if your interviewer told you that you need to design a messenger or a WhatsApp chat, so what should be your questions, right? So you can have multiple questions like, okay, what all features do you want as a part of this particular design? They might tell you that you should be able to come up with these features, and then we can have a discussion. So let's try to take and always try to keep one thing in mind, that you don't try to take like 10 or 15 features, because you won't be able to design everything within like 1 hour of interview, correct? So try to take limited features and try to take the ones which are which are the most highlighting features of your app. So the first and foremost feature of this particular messenger app should be what? You should be able to create conversation between two people, correct? You should be able to see what? You should be able to see whether the message was delivered or not. You should be able to see whether the message was seen or not, correct? And what else? You should be able to see the previous history of the conversation. So let's try to work on these three main features or these four main features, And let's not try to complicate your things, right? I mean, you can say that there should be some login, some mobile verification, then there can be, you should be able to add status, you should be able to change your profile picture. So yes, all those things are part of the functional requirement, but because you are in an interview and you have only 1 hour to complete your question, try to take limited features which seems to be most important ones and try to focus on that going forward. Okay, so these are our functional requirements. Now what are non-functional requirements? So functional requirements are generally corrected by end users. I'll just mention here end users. Okay, now non-functional requirements are the requirements which are generally taken care by you as an engineer. Okay, for example, there are few parameters on which you should definitely think about. Okay, the first term is reliability, whether your system is reliable or not, or how to make your system reliable. So this comes as a part of the non-functional requirement. Now end user won't tell you that your system should be reliable. I mean, they will assume that your system will be reliable, because if your system is not reliable, you won't get the audience on your platform. So this is a non-functional requirement which is generally taken care by you as an engineer. Now what else can be there? What is the latency of your system, right? How much time does it take to return the response? So I'll mention time to return the response. Or I'll say turnaround time to return the response. So basically it's a time when you have sent the request, when you have received the response, minus time when you have sent the request. Okay. So this represents the latency of your system, correct? So again, depending on system to system, it should be within few seconds, few milliseconds, microseconds. So it can vary from system to system. Then you can also talk about whether you want availability in your system or consistency in your system. We'll talk about this term in a while, but your system should be available or not, or your system should be consistent or not, and accordingly you should be able to decide the right set of design going forward. So you should take all these factors into consideration. There are again many more factors which comes as a part of the non-functional requirement, but briefly you can talk about these things, right? That your system should be reliable. So one thing can come as a part of the reliability is that your system, because you're designing a WhatsApp chat, your system should be end-to-end encrypted. So there should be end-to-end encryption. What is end-to-end encryption? So end-to-end encryption is nothing. I won't go into the details, but I'll try to tell you on a very high level. So basically what you do is, whenever let's say you are user B, I am user A, and if I'm sending a message to you, so whatever message I have written, if someone try to spy on that message, because the message will be transferred through the network, right? So if someone try to get the packet or try to spy the calls between the network and try to get the message, they should not be able to see the exact message which I have sent to you. They should be able to see the encrypted. What they'll see is the encrypted message, for which they won't have the key to decrypt. So let me briefly talk about the encryption and decryption part. I know most of you might already know, but I'm not sure if you have heard of this term, PGP. Okay, try to understand this, but let's not go into the details of PGP. I'll try to explain you how exactly encryption and decryption works. So it's very simple. Okay, what happens is that whenever let's say there is a user A and there is a user B, correct? Now what happens is that user A share their public key with the user B, correct? And user A has a private key, their private key. Okay, so private key exists with whom? Private key exists with the A, correct? This is private key of A, correct? This is public key of A, correct? Now, whenever B is sending a message to A, correct? Now, this public key can be shared between multiple people. So let's say we have C and D as well. So they all will have public key of A. Okay. Now, what encryption will do is when you actually apply this public key, whenever you are sending a message to A, correct? So let's say B is sending a message to A. So what they'll do is they'll encrypt the message with the public key of A. So it will be encrypted. Now, whenever there is a message which is on the network, even if someone will try to spy on this message, they won't be able to decrypt the message. Why they won't be able to decrypt the message? Because they don't have a private key with the help of which you can decrypt the message. So what A has done? A has shared their public key with everyone. And what they have told, whenever you send me the message, you encrypt it with my public key. And what A is doing here? They are saying that, okay, whenever I'll receive the message, I will decrypt it with my private key. So A will be able to decrypt the message here, which was sent by B. Similarly, if C will send a message to A, they will encrypt it with the public key of A, and they will send it to the A, and then A should be able to decrypt. So this is on a high level, the encryption and decryption part. Now, there might be different ways in which the WhatsApp or Messenger might be doing their end-to-end encryption. Of course, they won't make it open source for everyone. So there might be different ways, but I already gave you on a high level how exactly encryption and decryption work. And similarly, whenever A is sending a message to B, there will be a public key of B, which is shared with A, and a message will be encrypted, and finally message will be decrypted by. So that's how the encryption and decryption works. So I hope that is clear. So one reliability factor could be what? That there should be an end-to-end encryption, so that your private messages or private chat are not, no one can spy on those messages. Correct. Coming on to the latency part. So latency is nothing but the time difference between from the point when you have sent the request and to the point when you have received the response from your server. So that is known as the latency. And latency is always mentioned for one request and one response. So there are two terms which are generally we talk about. The first term is a latency, and the second term is threshold. Let me explain you this with the help of a really good example. So let's take a latency, and let's take threshold. Okay. So if I say the latency should be low, then that means that your system should be able to return back the response. The turnaround time, I'll call it as turnaround time, should be very less. Turnaround time should be less. That means that the latency of your system is low. Let's take an example. Let's say there is a car, okay, and there are 4 people sitting in this car, okay, and the car is running at a speed of 100 km/h. Correct. Now, if you will see the time which will take, time will be taken for this person to reach from point A to point B will be what? It will be what? 1 hour. Correct. So for one person as well, the time will be 1 hour. For the second person also, the time will be 1 hour. The third person also, the time will be 1 hour, and the fourth person also, the time will be 1 hour. Correct. Now, what is the latency? So latency will become equal to 1 hour. Correct. Now let's take a different value altogether. So let's say here it was a car, and now you have a bus. Correct. So a bus is having this, and we have to travel 100 kilometer only, right? So consider that you have to travel 100 kilometer only. The bus is running with 100 kilometer per hour. The latency is 1 hour. Now you have a bus. Bus is going with the same with the speed of 50 kilometer per hour, but having what? 100 people. So here we had 4 people. Here we have what? 100 people. Okay. Now, if the bus is taking 100 people and it is running at a speed of 50 kilometer per hour, and the bus has to travel what? 100 kilometer. Correct. So what will be the latency? So latency, so it will take what? It will from point A to point B. If the distance is 100 kilometer, the time taken will be what? 2 hours. Correct. Now the time taken is 2 hours. So what is the latency here? So latency in this case is 2 hours. Now let's talk about the threshold. So threshold value is the number of, like, the total time taken upon the total people which have traveled. So basically in our case, there will be request. So it will be what? 200 hours is like 120 minutes, and total number of people are 100. Correct. So this will become what? 1.2 is the is the threshold. But here, if you'll check the threshold will be what? It will be what? How many minutes it is taking? 60 minutes it is taking. For how many people? For 4 people. So it will become what? 15 minutes. And here it is what? 1.2 minutes. So generally, whenever we talk about the latency, so I hope you understood the difference between latency and threshold. So whenever we talk about the latency, whenever we talk about system design, we generally talk about latency, but we don't focus on threshold. But let's say if the latency is overall less, correct? If the latency itself is less, then automatically the threshold will also decrease, correct? But latency is only for one particular request. Threshold is for all the requests. So if the latency for all the requests are low, then the threshold will be automatically low. But if latency for some of the requests are less and latency for some of the requests are high, then the threshold might go up in that case. For example, here, because what can potentially happen is, you can say that although there were 4, because let's say you were able to send only 4 requests, although the response you were returning were with 100 kilometer per hour, but still you were only able to send 4 people here. Instead, here you are going with the slow speed, but for 100 people, the speed was constant and it was serving all 100 people. Here it was serving only 4 people. So here the threshold is better, although the latency is a bit high on this side. So latency is what? 2 hours, but the threshold is good. But if you reduce this latency to 1 hour as well, the threshold will automatically improve. So the latency, let's say again here, the latency what was 1 hour, right, which is 60 minutes. So if we have the same latency and the number of requests we are serving are still 100, then automatically my threshold will also decrease. So that is the difference between latency and threshold. And these kind of points will give extra points in the interview, because generally most of the people talk about the latency, but they don't talk about the threshold of your system. So threshold is equally important. Latency is important, but latency we talk about only one request. In threshold we talk about thousands of requests which are sent to your system. Yes. Okay. Before I move on to the next part, I would request everyone to please stay on mute if you don't have any question. Definitely ask me a question if you have one. I'll be happy to answer this. So I hope you understood the difference between latency and threshold. Okay. Shall we move on to let's move on to the next part. So that comes again as a part of the low latency or a high latency. And that's why we've discussed about latency and threshold. Now let's talk about availability and consistency. So I know that some of the people might have already heard of CAP theorem, but I'll briefly talk about the CAP theorem. I won't go into the details of CAP theorem because of the time constraint. So let's see CAP. Okay. Okay. So I'll So C is what? C represents consistency, A represents availability, and P represents partition tolerance. And what CAP theorem says is that whenever in a distributed system environment, you will always need partition tolerance So your system can support either consistency or availability. So in a distributed system environment, you can't get consistency and availability together. And if you wanted, see again, mark my word, right? It's a distributed system environment. What does it mean? If there are multiple, if it's a distributed system, then you will need partition tolerance for sure. So you can't get the consistency as well as the availability. Now let me explain you these terms very, very briefly. So partition tolerance says that even if there is a even if there is a network breakage between your multiple servers or multiple systems, then your system should be able to support. It should be able to serve the request from the users. Now it can serve the request in two ways. Either it can serve the request by being consistent, or it can serve the request by being available. Now, what is consistency and availability? So let me talk. I'll give you an example. So generally, it becomes much more easier to explain these terms with the help of an example, instead of I am explaining the details of these terms and then you getting confused. So let me give you an example. Please, can you please be on mute? Please don't unmute yourself if you think that there will be any background noise. Please, can you go on mute? Looks, I see that there is one person who is not on mute. So can you please go on mute? Okay, looks like you are still not on the mute. Please go on mute. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, oh sorry, I forgot where was it. Yeah, so I was talking about consistency and availability, and I'll try to explain you with the help of an example whether you should prefer consistency or availability. So let's take an example of a bank. Now, if you're transferring the money from one account to another account, and the money is debited from one account and money has to be credited into another account. So what would you prefer here? Would you prefer consistency of your system, or would you prefer availability? So by consistency, I mean that whether you want that whenever the money is deducted from one account, it should be definitely credited into another account. Or what can happen is, because these two accounts can lie, let's say these two accounts lie in a different network altogether, and there is a network breakage. So either you want consistency or you want the availability. So consistency will tell you that the money should be debited from account one only when you are sure that it can be credited into second account. So this will be your consistency. And the second part is, okay, some B4E5 is there. Can you please go on mute? Okay, no worries. Yeah. So that is the consistency, and the availability is that it's okay even if the money is debited at this point of time. My system should always be available, so I should not fail any request from B at that point of time, and B should work as it is. A should work as it is. We'll credit the money at a later point of time. That should be fine. So what would you prefer? So generally, you might have seen the cases of stuck transactions, right? And because these are across the different banks altogether, right? That's why you see that the money is stuck in between. But think about a case where you are storing these details in a table within a same bank. You have two tables where I'm just giving you an example, okay? You are debiting the money and you are crediting the money. Should it happen in one transaction or not? It should be a part of one transaction. So in case if you see that there is some system which is not working right now, you should not that system should be made unavailable for that moment of time, but it should be always consistent, because what can happen is A has debited the money, B will think that okay, my money will be credited, and B might do a transaction of a larger amount. Then the transaction of B will fail because the money from A is not yet credited, right? So in scenarios like this, you try to prefer the consistency over availability. Now let's take another example. So let's say you are designing a system, a social media channel, or a Twitter, where you see that, like, on a wall you see a lot of posts, correct? You see a lot of posts from other people. Now let's say if I am a user and you are my follower, okay, uh, I'm a Twitter user and you are my follower and you are following my tweets. So when I have actually posted a tweet, would you prefer that tweet should appear immediately, or is it's okay even if that tweet appear like after few seconds? And here, whenever I'm talking about the window, right, between the consistency and availability, it's not even in seconds, okay, it's in milliseconds, or maybe very few seconds, like 2 or 3 seconds. So not more than that. So don't consider that this window is a very large window of like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or 1 hour. Again, this can differ from system to system, but it can differ from system to system, but try to assume that this window is very small. So whenever there is a availability, you will always get eventual consistency, and whenever there is a consistency, you will eventually get availability. Why you will get availability? Because even if your one server goes down, there is a master, you will generally have a master, we'll come on to that as well, but you have a master slave configuration, and your slave will take a master position, and your system, you'll try to bring up your system as soon as possible, because you need to serve the users. So what would you prefer, whether you prefer the availability or the consistency? And sometimes there will be you will have some opinions that I should prefer consistency or I should prefer availability. There will be arguments, but try to figure out what is the right use case, what is your right use case, and accordingly decide whether you want consistency in your system or availability in your system. So I hope you understood what I'm trying to say. Correct. So yeah, any questions?
Prakal, one question. So, like, where does partition tolerance come here in the picture? Like, can you just
Partition tolerance is, uh, partition tolerance is nothing but it says that whenever there is a network, right, whenever there are multiple servers, it's a distributed system network environment, there should be a partition tolerance. Basically, what terms, think about the term, right? It says partition tolerance. What is happening? These are the partitions, right? These are different partitions. These are the different systems which are connected with each other. So your system should be able to tolerate that partitions. I mean, if there is a network breakage, your system should be able to tolerate it. Now, how can you make it how can you make it tolerant? You can either give it a consistency or you can give it availability, right? So for example, let me draw a diagram. So I mean, yes, I know that people get confused with this term, but the term itself will give you a clarity what exactly partition tolerance means. So whenever there happens a partitioning, then your system should be able to tolerate that partitioning. So let's say there are these systems. Okay, and you want to maintain the consistency. Now, if there is a partition tolerance, that means that this server is unable to interact with A and B at all. Correct? Then there will be there can be a request which can come to A, there can be a request which can come to B, there can be a request which can come to C. Now, if you are saying that I want availability, so what availability will say is, can you please go on mute if your question, okay, there's only one person who is not on mute, should be fine. So what will happen here is, because you want availability, so what will happen is, here you have what will you do? You're saying that the system should be available. So whatever request are coming onto C, right, you will send the response for these requests as well. Now this response which you are getting might not be consistent, right? Because some actions might have already been taken on A and B, but you won't get those responses, correct? Now, if you want consistency in your system, then in that case, what you will say is, because this system. So availability, what you'll do, you'll keep on returning the response as expected from all these, even from this one as well. Now, but if you want consistency, what you will say is, if this system goes down, and if I request, I mean, if there is a network tolerance partitioning between this, and if I receive any request to this system, I'll simply fail this request for now. Correct? You will simply fail this request, and you might actually incur. Again, you can design your system in such a way that you can fail all these requests, or you can design your system in a way that you return the response and make these two systems consistent. And whenever this system should always return the response only in case once it is up and it has become consistent with A as well as with. So this is the consistency and availability. So what you are saying, in case of availability, it's okay even if your data is not the latest one, you will still return the response. But in case of consistency, the system which has gone, I mean, if there is a network partitioning, so this system can't connect with this particular system, then what you will do is, if you receive any request on this particular system, you will send a failure to the system. You might get like 500 in this case, or you might get some HTTP error in such cases. Correct? But your A and B will still work as expected. So sometimes you get something went wrong, right? This could be because of this reason. I am not saying that this is because of this reason. Could be because of this particular reason.
Okay.
So I hope I answered your question.
So basically, when we are talking about distributed systems, so we are taking that by default it will have partition tolerance.
You should have, right? Because correct. By default, you should have partition tolerance, correct? You should be able to tolerate that partitioning, right?
Right.
By default, you always take partition tolerance, and either you can take a consistency in your system or you can take availability in your system. But Amit, one thing to notice here is that don't consider that the window for this availability and the tolerance is like a very huge window. Because if this window becomes huge, right, there can be a complete network failure and your complete system can go down. Okay, so this window is very small. It's in few seconds. Okay, so just try to take a note of it, because what can potentially happen is, if it happens for a longer time, then there will be a lot of load on a particular servers, correct? And that might bring your other servers down, because from one server you are not even returning the response, right? Or you might have again, there can be different strategies, right? You'll bring down that server itself. So all the requests by your load balancer can be redirected to other servers. Now, if there is a load on one particular server, it can also potentially go down, correct? So there are multiple factors you need to consider, but just to make it simple, what we are saying is, always have either you can have a consistency or availability in a in a distributed system. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Cool. No worries. Thanks for asking that question. Let's move on to the next part. So yeah, I think we have spent enough time on consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. Let's go on to the next part, which is about the estimations. So we might not be able to complete the complete design, but we'll see part of it, and maybe we'll continue in this in the next lecture. Okay. So we have the estimations as well, or I'll try to finish most part of it. So we'll do the estimations. I'll give you an example of estimations, and then what you can do is you can try to make other estimations by yourself, and it's not very difficult. You will be able to come onto these estimations very, very easily. Okay. Now estimations can be in different factors. Now there can be estimations in terms of the QPS. What is QPS? QPS is query per second. So basically what it means is that the number of queries your system will receive in a second. So that actually signify traffic in a way, right? So let's say your system is getting 100 requests in a second to perform some action, then it is known as the system is getting the QPS is 100 QPS in that case. Okay. For example, let's say 1,000 of people are logging in in a second. Right? So that is known as 100,000 QPS per second for a particular system. Now it might vary from time to time. So how to come up with the exact QPS? How many servers do you need? How many? So let's say if one server can support 10 queries per second, then you should be able to make the estimations of how many. I'm just taking an example, right? So how many queries your server how many queries you will get and how many servers you will need to support those many number of queries. So the way you make estimation is that you come up with a number. So the way you come up with a number is that you will think that, okay, let's say we have to design a WhatsApp. Okay, now to design a WhatsApp, you have to figure out how many people will actually use WhatsApp in a day. Okay. So let's say if I assume that, just take a rough number, right? So let's say approximately 20 million people. Is that a good number? Or maybe 30 million, or let's say 50 million people are using WhatsApp in a day. 50 million is what? 10 million is 1 million is 10 lakhs. So 10 million is 1 crore. So 50 million is 5 crore. So let's say, I mean, I'm just taking it, it's in a day, 50 million people in a day. So 5 CR, again, this need not to be exact correct, or it need not to be very accurate, but you should make some estimation so that you can make, so you need to make some assumption, and based on these assumptions, you can make the further estimations of your system. So let's say if you have 50 million users in a day, then they'll be distributed across 10 hours, let's say, right? So because let's consider that 50 million people are using your WhatsApp in India. Let's design it for India for now. So 5 crore people in a day are using, and they'll be generally using it either. So most of the traffic you will see is in early morning, or you will see in the night, mostly in the night. So let's consider that there will be peak hours when you will see a lot of traffic. So most of this 50 million user, so can I say that 90% of the users will be using WhatsApp in peak hours, correct? In peak hours, and let's say those peak hours are 10 hours. So some like 4 to 5 hours at night, maybe 2 to 3 hours in between, and some 3 to 4 hours in the night, in the morning. And then the rest of the 10% of the users will be using it, which is not a peak time, correct? So now 90% of 50 million is what? 45 million. So we are saying that you should be able to, so we have approximately 45 million people using WhatsApp in what? In 10 hours, correct? So now if I want to see how many users are actually, what will be the QPS at that point? So what we'll do, we'll write 45 million. So how to write million? 45, this will be 100,000, and this will be this, correct? And we are saying 10 hours. So I'll do 10 into 60 into 60. Correct. So this will this become this, and this will become 6 6 36, which comes out to be what? 36. So it will be approximately 1.2. Okay. So 1.2 into 1000. Correct. So 1.2 into 1000 will be what? It will be 1000, right? So it will become what? 1200. Yes. So you understood how I actually calculated the QPS. Now these are, I mean, you don't need to exactly divide these numbers as well. You can make some estimations. So that should be perfectly fine. So we have said that this will be 1.2, somewhere between 1.2, and that's why this will be 1.2 into 1000. So it came out to be what? 1200 QPS. So your system should be able to support 1200 QPS. Now, if one server can handle 100 requests, 100 QPS, then how many servers you will need at this point of time? You will need approximately 12 servers. So this is the estimation which you have made on the QPS. This is the estimation which you have made on your servers. Now the next point can be that how much memory you need for next 5 years. Correct? So next 5 years, how much memory you need. So you have said that on a daily basis we are getting what? 50 million user. Correct. Now if I say 50 million user, then approximately how many words they'll be writing in a day? So on an average, can I say that I need to store the data for around so can I say that there will be one message, and each message will be of how many characters? Will be of let's say one message can be of around 100 characters. Okay, I'm making some assumptions again. Okay, 100 characters. And on an average, a user interact with 10 different users, correct? And they send like approximately 2 messages to every user. So this will become what your number of messages. So this is what, this is the number of messages by a person. Sorry, number of users who a particular user will interact to. So number of user, one user, so 1 million people, 50 million people will interact with each other, right? So I'm saying that number of user, and they will be sending 2 messages on an average. So this will become what, 50 million into 20, 50 m into 20. These many number of messages you need to store. Now, what is the cost of storing one message? It is around 100 characters. So we'll do into 100. So this will become what, 50 million into 20 into 100, and this is for 1 day, correct? This is for 1 day. And now if I take the memory, then how many? So these will be like number of bytes, correct? Because 100 character and 1 character is of 1 byte, correct? So this will become these many bytes. Now we have these many bytes. Now what do you need to do? You need to convert it into what? The storage, right? How much memory it will need to store all this data. So your 1 byte, 1 KB is equal to 1024 bytes. So I'm approximating it to 1024, right? So I'm approximating it to 1000. So let's say you have 1000. So this will become your what? 1000 KB. So this will become KB. This will be MB. This will be GB. This will be TB. Correct. Now 3 zeros gone. 3 zeros gone. 3 zeros gone. 5 to the 10. So you have what? So we don't need this 1000, let's say. Right. So this will become what? 100. This 3 zeros are gone. 5 to the 10. Correct. 5 to the 10, and then there is a 0 here as well. So this will become what? 100. So this is what? 100 GB per day of data you have to store just for the messages. Correct? Because most of the cost will go in, most of the storage will go in the messages only, right? So 100 GB per day. Now, if you say that there is 100 GB per day, then if you need to scale it with for what? How many years? Next 5 years, correct? You don't need to scale it immediately, but eventually you need to scale it for 5 years. So how much memory you will need in next 5 years? So this will become what? 5 into 365. So this can be again approximated. So this will be again, let's say 1500, 1700 something. So this will become what? 1700 into 100. So this will give you what? 1700. So I can do TB. So 3 zeros gone. So 170 TB in next 5 years. So that's how you make the estimations, and you can make many more estimations like this. So you should discuss with your interviewer that what all estimations do I need to make. Now, because I'm explaining these things, that's why it took a lot of time. But I mean, you should remember these numbers, correct? Like 10 to the power something, and you should be able to quickly do these estimations and come do the approximations and come up with this. As I mentioned again, these numbers are not necessarily that these should be accurate. You can have some approximations, you can make some assumptions, but don't make random assumptions, right? You can't say that there will be only there will be like 1,000 million people will be using WhatsApp, because that is bullshit, right? The population of India is 130 crore. So you can't say that, and you should not say that only 1 lakh people will use WhatsApp in a day. So that is also not a correct estimation. But as long as you are keeping it in some millions, it should be fine. That is considerable. So make assumptions correctly. Don't make too random assumptions. Try to be as accurate as possible, but you don't need to be very accurate on these points. Okay. So that's how we have discussed about the that is how your estimations will work. Right. Now let's come on to the before I jump on to the next part, is there any question or confusion?
Hi. So for if in case the e-commerce site and we have some peak days where the 50% of the transaction is going on, so then how do we assume something? Like, do we need to design for those 5 days or
Yes,
the
yes,
remaining
yes.
normal days?
Definitely. you should be able, your system should be able to support this. And that's where the concept of horizontal scaling and vertical scaling comes up. So I'll try to talk about it in a bit. Give me some time. Correct. So I'll try to talk about this in a bit. But yes, I mean, you should be prepared for it, and how to actually make those preparation as well. That is also very much possible. So that normal traffic, right? So let's say if you have weak hours, let's say there is a Amazon e-commerce has some sale going on, or Flipkart is Big Billion sale is going on. Then what do? You know that usually the traffic will be 10 times more. So your capacity should be automatically increased by 10 times. Now, generally, what you do is instead of increasing it by just 10 times, you have another multiplier factor. So you always take a buffer in your things. Why should you take buffer? To avoid the circumstances or situations which are not predictable. So generally, what you do, you take a multiplier factor of like 1.3 or 1.4, 1.4, which is like, I mean, again, it depends on company to company or site to site or application to application or system to system. But you take a multiplier factor and then you say that, okay, I assume that there will be 10 times more traffic, and I take a buffer of 1.5. So I'll support, let's say we had 1200. So we'll support 12,000 is my assumption, which I'll get. And then I'll have a buffer of 6,000. So it'll be around 18,000. So my servers which are running should be able to support these many QPS, this much memory. So you should be prepared for it in such scenarios or in such situations. And and that's why estimation is very important. So your interviewer might ask you that how you will handle such situation, or if there is, because you have estimations and you have made the assumptions based on the factors that there will be 1200 QPS only. But let's say if there is suddenly some news which came up, right? Or if you see a sudden spike in the number of users, then how you will handle those cases. So, one way is to tell them that you can be prepared for it by taking some buffer value. So you can assume some buffer value always by having a multiplier factor depending on your use case and requirement. And the second thing which you can mention is that, if you are aware of such events or incidents before, then you will actually, scale up or scale down your system or your server based on the requirements. So that's how you answer those questions. Generally, you always take the buffer value, but always consider the buffer value. But yeah, you should be able to scale up or scale down your system in such situations. And there are systems like this, and which actually automatically help you doing it. So if you see that there is the traffic increasing, then they actually scale up and automatically scale up or scale down. But let's not go into those details, because that is something which is very specific to a software or a hardware. So we don't need to go into that detail. But in general, I hope you got my answer, that how can you actually plan for it, and how can you keep the buffer value always in your estimations.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next part. So we'll be talking about the detailed design. So a lot of you might have seen the API design and creation of tables and what all data you have to store in those tables. I won't actually go into that detail because of the time constraint, because I know that most of you will be able to design those things because you have industry experience, and most of you are, or even if you are freshers, you know that how to create, how to store the database value in the database, how to create a table. So I won't go into those details, or I won't go into the APIs. I'll try to talk about the core part of it, which is very important to design a WhatsApp chat or messenger. Okay. So see, there are few things which always remain consistent across all the systems. So what you have is, you always have web. So there is always so there is this internet. So next request will come through the internet. Okay. Then you have your web servers placed. This is your first layer of interaction. Okay. You can have firewalls on the top of it, but it should be fine. You don't need to go into those details in the interviews. And you have the load balancers before the web server. Now, what is load balancer? So consider this as again a hardware or a software which just try to distribute the load equally between your servers, so that one system or one server doesn't get loaded with like a lot of requests, and there is a resource under management on the other servers. And if you have a lot of load on one server, it can actually bring the system down if this server will be down, the load will come onto this server, and then this server might also go down. So generally what you have is you have a load balancer layer, and this load balancer takes care of distributing the load between your different servers. Okay, so you have load balancers. Then what happens is, this is the first layer of interaction where your client talks to your server, and at this layer itself you do some bunch of authentications. You might have heard of authentication and authorization, but this is the layer where you do a bunch of authentication and authorizations. So you check whether you validate if the user is a genuine user or not. You check, there are again multiple ways to do it. You authenticate the user. That can be done with two-way encryption, which we have discussed, or you can do SSL, or you can do PGP. There are different ways to actually verify the user. Correct. So this is these are the ways. Let's not go into these details again. But on a high level, you can say that authentication and authorization happen at the first layer, which is in the web servers. Now again, you might do a bunch of other authentication and authorization based on the next layer as well. But this is the first layer where you should definitely have some authentication layer, or you should have authentication in place in this web servers. Now what this does is, these web servers actually authenticate the user. They create the request as per the requirement, and then there is a call to your backend service. So again, you have a load balancer, and you can have multiple services in place. Now there can be different kind of services, and these services, so there can be a login service. Login service can be different. So the web server will remain same for all the requests, but the login service can be different. So if someone is trying to log in, then the request might go to this server. Now there can be again multiple servers, login servers as well. But just to explain you, this can be your login server, correct? And this can be your chat server, let's say. So it will go through the load balancer, and this can also be a chat server. So you can distribute the load, you can distribute the number of servers you need based on the different kind of requests. So you can say that only now you don't have login on WhatsApp or Messenger, right? I mean, if you are on the Facebook, then automatically logged in, or so you don't need to worry about this right now. But something like a new user, right? So new user will sign up. So like 1% of the requests are like a sign up request. So that can go to a particular server as well. So this is your backend service. And again, you have multiple servers on your backend service. And after that, again, you have a load balancer layer, so that you want to distribute load evenly again between your services, which are of same type. So let's say this is of same type, and there is again login service, another one. So again, you need to distribute the load. So load balancer will take care of doing the same thing. Okay. Now there can be another layer. There will be another layer which will be your database layer, and again you'll have load balancers here in place, which will distribute the load between your databases. So you can have multiple instances, right? We just talked about the distributed system. So you can have multiple instances of the databases, and depending on your requirement, you will distribute the load between your system or the database. So this is known as database. So these things remain same across all the high-level system design questions which you will come across, or which you'll see going forward. Right. Now this is the design, a high-level design of your system. There are many other factors which you need to consider, right? In this case, especially, what you need to do is you want that there should be two users which should be able to interact with each other. So you've got the high-level idea. Now, I mean, there are a bunch of other details on load balancers, authentication, authorization, how the services are configured, how your databases should look like, what kind of databases should you use, and how you actually make sure that if one system goes down, then how the other server on the DB server take the position of it, or how to actually add more servers on runtime, remove more servers on runtime, remove or add more services, or no, not services, more I would say more machines at a runtime. So all these things are part of the high-level design itself. But I'll try to discuss the core part of it, which is about the sending message. Now, if you might have already heard of this thing called, establishing. So you need to establish the connection between between the two layers, right? Between your client and the server. There are multiple ways to establish the connection. So one is very simple, which is your HTTP connection. Correct. What happens in the HTTP connection is that if there is a server, if there is a client, and if there is a server, and this is my client, what will happen is first authentication, two-way authentication will happen, two-way communication will happen. Some details will be transferred and the connection will be established. After this, the connection is established and the request is sent from the client to the server, and server will automatically return back the response to the client. So this is your HTTP connection. Now there are other connections as well, but the one which we'll be using here, I'll talk about that one. So that is WebSocket connection. So what happens in HTTP is once the connection is established, you send the request to get the response, and then this connection is again, you close this connection again after this. So this connection is actually closed after the request is sent, you get the response, and then there is a connection closed. Okay. So sometime I don't know how many of you have worked on the network layer, but sometimes you see that there is a connection closed exception. So what potentially happen is that your server is not responding or your client is not responding as expected, and that's why you can get a connection closed exception as well. Before even you send the request, the connection itself got closed. So and there can be timeouts as well. So all these are part of the HTTP request which you send. And then there are WebSocket connections. What happens in WebSocket connections is that if there are WebSocket connections, see what is happening here is there is a client and there is a server. Now there are different client, right? So this can be client 1 and this is my client 2. Okay, and this is again a server. So what is happening here is that client 2 will send a request message to the server because they won't directly interact with this client, right? Let's say this is my user 1, user A, and user B wants to send a message to user A. So they will send their message from the client to the server. Now this server should be able to return the response. Now, until and unless user A doesn't send a request to the server, the response won't be returned back from the server. Correct? Now the problem with the HTTP request is that you might, someone might keep on sending the messages to you, and unless you don't send a request every time, you won't get the response immediately. Correct? So that is the problem with HTTP. The other problem is that every time you have to establish a connection, send the request, get the response, and then close the connection. That's how HTTP is working. Correct? There are other ways as well, but that's how typical HTTP works. Correct? Now the problem is that it will take time to establish the connection, send the request, get the response, and again close the connection, and again then if you need to get the response again, then you again need to establish the connection. So it's a costlier call compared to the WebSocket. So the way WebSocket works is that your connection is established once and then retained. So we establish the connection. So there is a connection established between client and the server, and there is, after that, the connection is retained. And in case of WebSocket connections, what can happen is without client issuing the request to the server can send the data to the client. So they can send the data to the client whenever they see that there is something happening. There is some updated data which came onto the server. So send the data to the client. Okay, so that's how the WebSocket connection works. Now let's go into a bit of, so I've explained to you how exactly the different kind of connections are established and what kind of connections you should use based on your use case. So there are again different other kinds of connection as well, but I'll try to skip those for now, and we'll try to understand the design for the messaging chat. So now what is happening is, see, we have multiple servers. So we have multiple servers. So let's name these servers as A1, A2, A3. So let's consider that these are my backend front web servers. Okay. Now there is a load balancer before this. correct? And then there are clients. There can be a user A and user B and user C, correct? And what we do is, because we need to send this data on the runtime, what we try to do is whenever a message is sent from a user A, it will go to the load balancer, it will go to A1. Now we'll have a database somewhere here. So this is my web server, right? Assume that there is a application server in between as well, web servers. There is a database as well somewhere here, correct? Now what will happen is user A send a message to A1. Now A1 can store the data into the database, correct? But now A1 also has to push the data should be able to push the data if A2 is also online, right? So I should be able to send a message to user B if user B is online, correct? If they have connected with the internet. So what we do is we maintain another mapping in this case with the help of Redis. So I won't go into the detail of Redis. It's a distributed cache. And what we keep here is that what is the status of the person, each of the person, correct? What is the user which we have, and what is the server with which this user is connected. So we have server as well. So what we also keep is server here. So what all we have? We keep the status, we keep the user, correct, and we keep the server. So now A is connected to which status is 1 because they are still connected, and the server with which they are connected is A1. Now user B, let's say, is connected to A3. So we'll have status as 1 for user B and connected to A3. Now there is a user C which is connected, which is not yet connected. So can I say that the status is 0? And at this point of time, this user is not connected. And how do you check the connectivity? So you say that there you can have a time to live. So you say that for the next 15 minutes, the WebSocket connection will remain established, and after that, automatically I'll just change the status to 0. And then if there is any action taken by the user C, then automatically a new request can be sent in that case. Okay. So again, this can vary from design to design, but that's how you can configure your WebSocket. So now WebSocket is connected. Now what I do is whenever user A is sending a message, what I'll do, I'll write this message into my database, correct? After I write the data message into the it is necessary to write the data into the database, because what can potentially happen is before I send the message, and I mean, if it is not written in the database, I might lose this data, right? So first action we take is that write the data in the database. Now you can say that what if we fail to write the data in the database, then we can retry from this layer, right? Because we have captured this details. So if you'll do one thing, try this out by yourself. Okay. What you do is you try to switch off your internet, okay, and send a message to your friend on WhatsApp. Okay. Now, if you send a message to your friend on WhatsApp, you won't get any tick. Okay? Now, if you go and clear the cache of your WhatsApp because internet was not available, you won't see that message at all because it was not sent. It was not sent to the server at the first place. Because the message was not sent to the server, that message will disappear. It won't come because it was not sent. So until unless you don't get a single tick, what does single tick signify? It signifies that the message is gone, is actually written onto your, it has gone to the server. So you see sometime, right, that you still see a dot here, you don't see a tick, right? That dot comes because that message is not even gone to the server right now. So the server itself has not captured that data. So there is no guarantee that this message will be retained unless you don't see a single tick. That doesn't it means that the message is not gone to your server, and if when you see a single tick, that means the data is returned into a database and it will be retained infinitely. I mean, by infinitely I mean that till the time the WhatsApp is running up and running, it will be retained, or till the time you don't actually clear your data, it will be kept in the database. Correct. Now what happens is that you are sending let's say message to user B. So what this server will check is that is B user online. So how does it check that? It will check through the Redis. It will check if what is the status of user B. If the status is 1, it will check for which server it is connected. And it sees that it is connected on A3 because it's a WebSocket connection. A1 will send a message to A3. correct? And as I mentioned, because it's a WebSocket connection, A3 will deliver a message to user. Now, let's not go on to the scene part. Let's try to keep it as delivery part right now, that the message is sent and then message is delivered. You can see the scene as well. What you can do is, whenever the message is seen, you can always, so whenever the user come onto the WhatsApp again, right, you can send a request. So all that will, and if user open that particular conversation, you pass the conversation ID. So you can maintain some conversation between user A and user B. You pass the ID that will tell you whether all the messages are seen by user B or not. Okay, but let's keep it simple for now. Let's not go on to the scene part as well. So the message is delivered. This much you understood. Now what can potentially happen is that user A wants to send a message to user C. Correct? Now what will happen? In this case, user will send a message to A1. It will write in the database. A1 will see if there is an entry for user C in the database or not, or in the Redis cache or not. There is no entry in the cache. If there are two possibilities. If there are no entries, then we'll ignore it. And if there is an entry, then we'll check the status. The status seems to be 0 at this point of time. That means that the user C is not on. Now what will happen? User C, once they come online, they will be connected to some server. So let's say they get connected to A2. So there will be A2, and this will become what? 1. Correct? This will again become 1. And now we'll send the request and we'll try to see what all messages were sent recently to me. So what you will do is you will send a user C will get connected to database. It will fetch all the latest messages which are remaining. It will be pushed to the users. Now what can happen is user A won't know that user C has seen the message or not if they are offline. Correct? So again, you can maintain the status in the database and check if this status is changed to delivered as seen or not by user C, and accordingly you can deliver a message to user. But I hope you got a high level idea that how can you maintain the maintain these mapping. Now a quick question to everyone. Quiz question. So let's say there are 2 users. Okay, there are 2 users and they want to talk to each other. Correct. Then how many WebSocket connections will be created? And then you need to answer for 5 users. So there are 5 users, and then they want to connect with each other. They want to talk to each other. How many WebSocket connections will be established? Can anyone tell me quickly? Any one of you?
2 users, one WebSocket connection.
Okay. For 5 users?
For 5 users also, like if you are using some message queues like RabbitMQ or Kafka or something, so there will be only one WebSocket connection established, but like you need to subscribe to the RabbitMQ message queue, so that
let's not go to the RabbitMQ or because these are very specific queues or type of a queue. I agree with you, but your answer is not correct, and that's where most of the people make mistakes. See, the connection is between a client and the server here. It's not between 2 users. So even if this user wants to interact with this user, they will have to connect with the server. So this client is actually connecting with this particular server here. So even if there are 2 users, there are 2 WebSocket connections created. One is between this user and this server, this client and this server, and there is a second WebSocket connection between this client and this server. So make sure that you understand it correctly. So how many WebSocket connections are there? There are 2 WebSocket connections here. So server is communicating with server. Please understand, client can't connect with client, right? Because you don't have any connection between them. You are connecting, this client is connecting with this server. So there are 2 WebSocket connections. And when there are 5 users which are online, how many WebSocket connections will be there? There will be actually 5 WebSocket connections. Okay, so there is a 1 WebSocket connection for a particular user. Please try to focus on these points and don't misunderstand it, right? So I hope everyone got it, like why there are 2 WebSocket connections and why there are 5 WebSocket connections. Because client is interacting with one of the servers here, right? So that's why there is a WebSocket connection between this and this. Okay, so this is on a high level how the WebSocket connection work and how the messaging services work. You can actually design the databases. It shouldn't be very difficult. You can say that we also need to store the, you also might want to store the images, how there is a blob storage for it. So you can also talk about that. So there are many other factors, but what I wanted to discuss in this class was that what is the high level design for this particular. So I hope it is clear to everyone. So yeah, this is about, this is about the high level design. Again, we can have databases, what are the APIs which you need to support, and how to do the scaling of your system, how to do vertical scaling or horizontal scaling. So these are different terms, and it requires a lot of, it's not just, it is not very, so if you, all these terms are connected to each other, and you need to understand each of these terms in detail if you want to go into that granularity. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to give you a high level idea and what are the main core design for a WhatsApp or a messenger. So I hope you got an idea for this. And now if I talk about, there are other things as well, like there can be many, you can have a cache as well. Why do you need cache, why don't you need cache, what are the load balancers, what are different strategies to create a load balancer, how can create a load balancer, what is cache, what is the eviction policy of a cache, what are your what are the different kind of databases, which one to be used, when should you use which one. Then there can be scaling, what is horizontal scaling, what is vertical scaling. Then there are after that there comes a sharding, right? So under the horizontal scaling you can do a sharding as well. What is sharding, what are the different strategies of sharding the data. There is a horizontal sharding, vertical sharding. What is the difference, how can you make the system consistent, reliable. Then you can have what is two-way what are the different kind of ways to establish a connection between a client and the server. So we saw HTTP and then WebSocket connections, but there are other ways as well. Then what are queues, how queues can be used effectively. Different kind of caches, definitely. So these are like, there are so many terms which has to be which you need to understand to actually design the proper system. But I give you a brief idea about all these things, and hopefully these things are clear to you. I'll quickly talk about the monitoring and alerting system as well. So generally what you do is, whenever you actually create a service or a server, you should always try to consider the monitoring part of it as well. Why monitoring is important? Because you should be able to monitor the data, right? How many users are coming, what improvements do you need to make in your system, how to monitor the data. So you can write some counters like how many successful count were there, how many failure count were there, and you can display these counts in some way or the other. In a bucket of every 1 hour, you can try to count this data and store it in some table and try to read the data from that table. So that is one way of monitoring. You can have real-time monitoring as well, right? You write some system in such a way that it can calculate the QPS of every request going in, every request coming in, and you write that data somewhere in your in a way that it can be read from the database on the real-time basis. So you can do that as well. So these are, and you can create a graph on the top of it to actually monitor your data, to see that how much, what is the spike, how many users are coming on a daily basis. So all those things comes as a part of the monitoring. The second part is the alerting. So what is alerting? So you can create a you can have a alert. You can have actually the right set of alerts. So basically you can set a threshold value. So let's say if this particular request failed for within 1 hour, it fails for more than 50 times, then you should get an alert. How to get an alert? You can create a system which will actually send you a SMS or send you a mail, or give you a call on your phone or your team members, and then you can actually so that is known as alerting. You can set that threshold value in the different way as well. That what you can do is you can say that if 50% or 10% of my total requests are failing, or if 10% of my total requests are taking this more than this latency. So the latency is, let's say the standard latency you want to keep is 10 seconds. But if 10 seconds is too much actually, but it's okay. I'm just taking an example. For your internal system, let's say the latency is 10 seconds. If you don't get the response within 10 seconds, so you collect that for how many requests you are not getting the response in less than 10 seconds, and how many total number of requests you have got within 1 hour, and you create a bucketing factor, and you say that if 10% of the requests are not given to me in this many, if more than 10% of the request is taking more than 10 seconds, then you send me an alert. So you can create a separate system for it. So these are different ways to have the alerting system. And how to maintain the code. So maintenance comes automatically once you have the dashboards, real-time dashboards, you have monitoring systems, you have alert systems. You actually come, and then you can with the help of these things you can actually maintain the code. There are other factors which you should consider always designing the thing, designing your things, is that how to actually debug your data. So you should have proper logging system as well, which will keep logging the data into one of the systems so that it helps you. So the different things you should definitely log is what is the timestamp, some of the non-PII value. So you should not store the PII. PII is personal identification IDs. So you should not use actually. It's personal identification something. I think it's IDs only, but you should not store this directly because that in the logging system. But there should be a way to figure out that these are the values for the person, and these are the values for the request which have failed, and you can, so that with the help of the logging system you should be able to debug the things. So that's how you maintain your overall code, and that's how you maintain your overall system. Okay, so that's about the maintenance and alerting. Going back onto the part where I was talking about the detailed design of everything. So what we have tried to do is, I'll quickly walk you through my website, which we have created recently, which is Hackstack. So this is Hackstack, and you can see there are some feature videos here. This is system design basics to advanced. So I've covered everything in detail. Contains around 30 to 35 hours of content, detailed content. This is data structure and algorithm, and don't worry, the cost of this is not 22,000. Right now we are giving 80% discount. So the the coupon code which you can apply to actually get these lectures are Hackit80. There are other things as well which we are providing to our participants. So or the people who will take our lectures. So let me actually share it with everyone first. So this is the coupon code Hackit80, and we will be delivering such lectures. Right now we are doing it for everyone, but primarily we'll keep on having such sessions for our for people who have actually subscribed to our videos. We'll have at least 1 or 2 sessions in a month, and you can actually you can actually get sessions of other things as well, not only on this particular topics. So whenever there will be free sessions, you can attend those sessions as well. And if you have subscribed to our lectures, then definitely there will be sessions organized for people who have subscribed to the lectures after a time. So you will get those lectures you will get those sessions, online sessions. We'll have the key speakers as well. We are trying to bring a lot of key speakers onto our platform from different universities, good people who can talk about their experiences. So yes, you can actually get these details as well on the website. You can actually scroll through it. So there are a bunch of the coupon codes are can be applied on all the lectures which are featured by us. This lecture and this lecture is recently created, and these are really good. If you want to, you can go and take a look at it. So you can apply the password the coupon code is Hackit80. Both of these lectures are taken by me, and if you'll see that we have the events page as well. So you can actually go and check our latest events, and you can actually log into our events by sharing by logging in, or even you can fill that form and you can actually come onto our platform. And the other thing which I want to mention is that if you actually liked our lecture, like my lecture, and if you actually got some details, if it was insightful, please give us a feedback from wherever you have joined, from wherever you have actually attended these sessions, and hope to see you like more people on the platform. So please do share your feedback. Do go through our website. I have created the content, and I have tried to create a quality content. We have we have talked about everything in detail, like what are the different, these are arranged very properly as well. And we have talked about all these things in detail, like what are the load balancers, what are the different terminologies you need to understand for system design, starting from your reliability, consistency, availability, partition tolerance, what is cap theorem, what is latency, what is threshold, what is scaling, what is horizontal scaling, vertical scaling, what is the use case, how should you scale your system, then what is the sharding, how can you shard your data, consistent hashing, modified consistent hashing, then a bunch of other things, like we have discussed around 6 to 7 design problems as a part of this, and then load balancing, caching strategies, So there are a bunch of things involved as a part of the design system. You can actually go and take a look at it, and you can also check the others. It doesn't mean that you can't take a look at the other lectures. We have data structures and algorithms as well in Java. It's a very detailed content if you're preparing for your interviews. We almost 17 or 18 lectures are already uploaded. We have around content. We'll be having around content of around 50 hours in this. There'll be a very detailed content, like what questions you should prepare, how should you prepare. All those details are included as a part of the course. And there are other things as well, like Python. We have advanced data structures and structures and problem solving questions. We have low level design. If people are interested for that, we have Python. We have data structures algorithm in Python, because we know that there are a lot of people who are looking forward for the lectures in the Python as well. And one more thing to mention, that it's not the end. I mean, there will be more sessions. There will be many more sessions going forward. Please do try to attend if you're interested, and do write a feedback, because I want more and more people to get help of such lectures, because anyways these are organized for free. So do give us a feedback if you have enjoyed our lecture and if you have learned something out of it. Thank you. Thanks a lot for joining. You can give us a feedback on our website as well. You can give us a feedback on the platform from where you have joined, and do actually take a look at the lectures which we have added as a part of this. And will this recording be shared? So I will try to see if we can actually share this recording. We don't want to make it public at this point of time, but these will be definitely included as a part of our recording somewhere. So we'll try to see if we can share it with everyone. But yeah, I mean, yes, but these details are definitely part of our lectures and our courses. So you can take a look at that. So yes, that's it from my side. I hope you enjoyed the session and you have learned something out of it. Do give us a feedback if you liked it. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take those as well. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you everyone, whoever has joined. And I'm happy to take questions if there are any. We'll have a similar session tomorrow on advanced data structures, where we'll be trying to solve a couple of questions, or we'll try to see 1 or 2 questions, and how to prepare for the interviews as well for the Java. So you can actually come to that lecture as well. Okay. I hope you enjoyed the session. Cool. Thank you. Thanks a lot. If there are no further questions, I'll end the meeting now. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining. Bye. Take care and stay safe. Stay happy. Take care. Good night. Bye. Yep. I'm ending the. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Yeah.
Bye.